Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I can't believe it's April already, and we're here with another monthly market update for Simcoe County and parts of southern Muskoka. So before we get started with specific communities, I wanted to talk a little bit about what happened last month. So last month we actually saw our first month-over-month increase in Toronto in over a year. You might be saying, Ben, Toronto's not the same market as the market you're in. And yes, you're absolutely right. But typically we see a ripple effect of whatever's happening in the GTA and in major centers starts to slowly move its way, in our case, north through Barrie, Orillia, and then out into Simcoe and Muskoka and so on. While we should take these numbers with a grain of salt, I think it's important to also keep an eye on what's happening in these major centers. So let's dive in. We're going to start off with Midland. In Midland, for the month of March, we saw an average sale price of $646,752, which is up from February from $562,240. Now remember, in these small communities, we have smaller sample size, but we are seeing a trend upwards over the last 3 months in Midland. The number of new listings also rose significantly from 31 in February to 41 in March. The number of sales in Midland also rose from 10 to 23, which is normal. We're getting into spring. It's normal to see an uptick in activity in any market. Now, days on market has slightly decreased for Midland in March, going from 20 in February to 17 in March. And if we look at the percentage of original list price, so to recap, percentage of list price is the original amount the house was listed for versus the final selling price of the home. So we saw a slight decrease in March, going from 97.8% in February, which is fairly high as of late, to 95.9%. Just to put things in perspective, during the peak of the pandemic when the housing market was crazy and everything was selling super quickly, March 2022, Midland saw 113% purchase price versus the original list price. Moving on now to Penetang. So the average sale price in Penetang rose from $503,750 in February to $828,190. Now, sample size is even smaller in Penetang, so let's look at the number of sales. Rose from 4 in February to 10 in March. The number of new listings in Penetang also rose quite dramatically, going from 12 in February to 28 in March. So we're starting to see a little bit more inventory, which we absolutely need. We're at historic lows pretty much across the country for inventory. So seeing an uptick in new listings is a good sign. Now, the average days on market in Penetang decreased from 85 days to 18 days, so the new listings are selling quicker. And the percentage of original list price rose from 95.8% in February to 100.2% in March, meaning on average, houses were selling for what they were listed at. Next, let's look at Tiny Township. The average sale price in Tiny decreased in March, going from $963 in February to $953 in March. So not a big decrease. The sample size in Tiny is always tiny, pun intended. So let's look at the number of sales. In February, we saw 10 sales versus 19 in March. So almost doubling. The number of new listings is also raised significantly, which is a good sign, going from 31 in February to 72 in March. Now, Tiny does have large pockets that are recreational properties. Some may be seasonal. So typically in these markets, you can see every year over the summer, there is a large number of listings versus the winter where it drops right off. Average days on market decreased in Tiny, so it went from 62 days in February to 60 in March. And if we look at percentage of original list price, on average in February, houses sold for 94.2% of the original list price versus 98.4% in March. Let's move on to Tay Township. So the average sale price in Tay Township rose from $513 in February up to $735 in March. So that's a big increase, but small sample size. 8 sales in February, 14 sales in March. The number of new listings in Tay went from 20 in February to 38 in March, so almost doubling here again, which is good to see. Days on market is coming down, so houses are selling quicker, going from 37 days in February to 29 days in March. And finally, let's look at percentage of list price in Tay. So in February, houses were selling for 94.1% of the original list price versus 97.1% in March. Next, let's look at Oro-Medonte. So Oro-Medonte saw an average sale price of just under $1.1 million in March, and of just over 1 million in February. So a slight increase here as well. Number of sales increased in Oro as well, going from 17 in February to 27 in March. Number of new listings is also increasing. Good sign for this time of year. 44 in February to 68 in March. Days on market stayed pretty even, or stayed exactly even, with 28 in February and 28 in March. And percentage of original list price was 97.3% in February versus 96.6% last month. Next, let's look at Severn. So Severn, again, we see these outliers all over the place because of that small sample size, but the average sale price in March was $745 versus $786 in February. Slight decrease. If we look at the number of sales, however, we went from 11 in February to 25 in March. Again, we're seeing a number of new listings increase, going from 29 2 months ago versus 52 last month. So almost double, not quite, but almost. Houses are starting to sell a little bit quicker as well, with 34 days on average in February versus 30. Houses aren't necessarily selling any quicker in Severn for this month, but the number is staying pretty average across the last little while. So we had 34 days in February versus 37 days in March. And looking at percentage of original list price, we saw a slight decrease in March, going from 96.5% in February to 95.3% last month. Next, let's look at Orillia. So Orillia had an average sale price of $617,000 in February. That went up last month to $665,000. The number of sales in Orillia jumped from 30 to 47 in March. A little bit more activity, normal for this time of year. The number of new listings, nice to see an increase here again. So we went from 44 in February to 69 last month. The amount of time it's taking to sell your home is decreasing in Orillia. So we had 37 days on average in February versus 25 days on average in March. So that's a fairly significant decrease. And if we look back to December, we've dropped by over 50, exactly 50%. So the market is picking up a little bit and houses are moving quicker in Orillia in general. So if we look at percentage of list price, slight decrease in March, going from 96.7% in February to 95.1% in March. Moving along now to Barrie. So Barrie saw a slight decrease in their average sale price in March, going from $732 in February to $725 in March. Now, the number of sales did increase dramatically. So we had 130 sales in February versus 195 in March. Once again, normal activity for this time of year. The number of new listings also increased dramatically, going from 237 in February to 351 last month. Homes are selling quicker again in Barrie, going from 25 days on average in February to 24 days on average in March. But if we look back to January, that number was 37. Finally, the percentage of original list price for Barrie crept up slightly towards that 100% mark. So we had 98.3% in February and 98.5% last month. Now, a lot of this comes down to how the homes are priced. Are they being priced appropriately? During this huge increase here, there was a large trend in the industry where people would underprice their house to drive multiple offers, set an offer date, and then the house would come in way over the original list price. That isn't really happening anymore, so that's why we're seeing numbers that are a little bit closer to 100%. Next, let's look at the municipality of Springwater. So Springwater saw an average sale price increase from $977 in February up to $1.23 million in March. Now, a small-ish sample size. There was only 15 sales in February, but that did increase almost by double in March to 28 sales. The number of new listings is also increasing fairly dramatically. So we had 46 new listings in February, and then 62 new listings last month. Days on market stayed fairly consistent, going from 33 days to 36 days in March. And finally, the percentage of original list price dropped from 97% in February to 95.8% in March. Next up is Wasaga Beach. So we saw a slight increase in the average sale price, going from $699 in February up to $727 last month. The number of sales in Wasaga also increased dramatically, going from 21 in February all the way up to 50 in March. So that's over double. I think this is a sign that consumers are starting to have a little bit more confidence in the market with the rate holds, that rates won't necessarily increase again this year, hopefully. And also more activity is common in the spring. People don't want to move in the winter. Next up, let's look at Collingwood. So the average sale price in Collingwood dropped last month, going from $793 in February to $737 in March. A little bit of an opposing trend to most of the other communities we're looking at today. The number of sales here decreased from 34 to 23. Now, Collingwood is a large ski community. There is a fair amount of recreational properties there that do transact over the winter versus spring and fall. So I think that's important to keep in mind for this area in particular. But also 23 is a very small sample size. So it's really important to keep in mind the quantity of the stats, because the smaller the sample size, the less of a general trend we can pull out of those statistics. Now, the number of new listings did increase in Collingwood, going from 58 to 85 in March. Days on market decreased fairly significantly, going from 51 days in February to 33 days in March. And then the percentage of original list price increased slightly. So this really has nothing to do with the market, the percentage of list price. It more has to do with how well the homes are priced to begin with. So we went from 93.1% on average in February up to 94.7% in March. Finally, let's zoom out and take a look at the big picture. So for all of Simcoe County, the average sale price saw a slight increase in March, going from $762 in February to $789. Now the number of sales did increase. We had 372 sales in February, went up to 574 in March. An increase of about 30%. If we look at the number of new listings, we're also seeing a massive increase, going from 813 to 1,210. The amount of time it takes you to sell your home in Simcoe County has decreased slightly, going from 34 days in February to 30 days in March. Finally, let's look at percentage of original list price. Once again, this really isn't a market indicator. This is more of an indicator of how well the home is priced. So we went from 96.5% in February to 96.9% in March. So good pricing out there, everyone. Anyway, that's all I have for you this month. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. I put out new content every week to help get you ready to make your next move in real estate a good one. Not only that, if you want to chat about the real estate market, I have a link in the description below where you can book a call directly with me, book a free home evaluation. You can talk anything real estate related that you want to talk about. Just click on that link below. You'll be able to book right into my calendar and let's chat. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you in the next one.